Assertions. This is lecture 17 of section 4. Let's begin. In this lecture, we will study about what an assertion is, how to validate a response, contains and not contains assertions, XPath and XML, XPath assertions, XPath functions, XPaths and regular expressions, XQuery assertions, compliance, status and standards assertions, security assertion, SLA assertion, how to best use assertions, the inbuilt assertion features, and followed by a test at the end of the lecture. Also, with a quiz in the end. What is an assertion? Assertion means act of affirming or stating something. It can also be interpreted as a checkpoint or a validation point. Now, once a request is sent to a web server, a response is received. We need to validate if the response contains the data that we expect. In order to validate that response, we need to use assertions. So assertions in SOAP UI, as stated, would help testers to affirm, confirm the correctness of the test results or the response. Now, any number of assertions can be added to a sampler test step, each validating some different aspect or content of the response. They are used to validate the message received by a test step during execution, usually by comparing parts of the message or the entire message to some expected value. These are the main test steps for validating the functionality of your services. They are primarily used to either send or receive messages, which can then be validated via an standard assertion mechanism. Assertion can only be used with either test step or test cases. It is not possible to put an assertion in the request template under the binding operation method, and a corresponding failed entry is shown in the test execution log. Now, what are the types of assertions? There are various ways of asserting a response. However, we will focus on the commonly used assertion types while validating a response. Here are some of the ones that are available in open source version of SOAP UI. Property content, compliance status and standards, script, SLA, JMS, and security. How to validate a response. Now, after Sampler TestStep executes, all of its assertions are applied to the received response, and if any of them fail, the test step is marked as failed in the test case view. Now, here we have a test case view. We can see that the test request login test step has failed, and we can see the details of that in the test case run log at the bottom, because it tells the details of the actual assertion failure. Now it states that not SOAP fault response is a SOAP fault. Now this tells that the not SOAP fault assertion has failed and the response was a SOAP fault message. So this is how we validate a response in the test case view. Okay, now let's move on towards the contains and not contains assertions. Assertions are divided in several categories for easier managing. Only categories that contain applicable assertions for specific type of sampler are enabled. Okay, so one type is the contains assertion. This searches for the existence of a string token in the property value. It supports regular expressions also. This is applicable for any property. So it checks for the existence of a specified string. Then we have the not contains. This searches for the non-existence of a string token in the property value. This again also supports regular expressions and is applicable to any property. So it's check for the non-existence of a specified string. Now let us have a look at the contains and not contains assertions as used in the tool. Now open a test request so that you can see the XML of the test request and also its response. Now first we'll look into the contains assertion, which basically checks for the existence of some text in the received response or request response. It also supports regular expressions. Now, you see, by default, there are no assertions related to that test request. The number of assertions are shown in this tab. Now, to add a new assertion, you click on the Add New Assertions button. Now, you select the assertion category. You will select property content, and then you select the assertion type, which we have selected as contains, and then you click on Add. Okay. Now we want to see that what does this response contains. We got this response for a test request, and we want to check if it contains a particular value or not. Now let's see that whether it contains the message invalid zip or not. Let's see if it contains this error message or not. So we put this in the contains assertions content, and we click OK. Now, as soon as we do that, as soon as we add it, immediately the assertion is executed and it shows valid or invalid. So our assertion has been executed. It contains that it shows that it's valid. The contains assertion is valid because this response contains the following expression that we wrote. Now let's see that we change the contents of the contains assertion to simply or we write true. Does it contain the word true? Let's check it. And immediately after, it shows that the contains assertion has failed, and the reason is that missing token true in the response. So this means that the assertion has failed and previously the assertion had passed. So this is how the contains assertion works. Now the counterpart of the contains assertion is the not contains assertion, which checks that a specified string does not exist in the asserted message. Okay. Now what we do is that for the same test request we add another assertion. We select from the category, and then we select the not contains assertion, and then we add it. Now we want to know that what does this response, the test is that we should check what this response does not contain. So for example, if we write again invalid zip and we click OK, so the not contains assertion failed because the response contained the string invalid zip. So we can see that the response, because it says response contains the token, right? So in that case, the not contains has failed. And if we write true as the content of the not contains assertion, and then we click OK, then the not contains has become valid, and because this does not contain the word true. So basically, the contains and not contains are the exact counterparts of each other. They're the exact opposites of each other. And that is how we've now seen how both of them work in the tool. Now let's move towards the XPath assertion. All messages which are received by Sampler TestSteps are internally converted to an XML counterpart, which provides a common ground for assertions and other post-processing. Like we can see over here, we have an XML request and XML response. Now this also makes way for two of the most powerful assertions, XPath match and XQuery match, which both utilize the name technologies to provide fine-grained message validation possibilities. Now we will just discuss XPath. We'll discuss the XQuery assertion in a while after that. The XPath assertion applies a specified XPath expression to the received message and validates the resulting nodes against an expected value. If the values match, the assertion passes, otherwise it fails. We'll see it all in detail in this tool. XPath is actually an XML query language for selecting nodes from an XML document. So basically we select the nodes from the document, from the response document, and we assign an expected value to that node. So we expect the certain value to be assigned to this particular node. And if that value comes, the assertion passes, and if that value doesn't come and a different value comes, then the assertion fails. Now let's add a new assertion to this request, get city forecast by zip. Okay, we add an assertion. We select the category, which is property content, and after that we select the assertion type, which is XPath match this time, and then we add it. Now after pressing OK, this configuration dialog box is opened. Now the dialog box is divided into two areas. The top specifies the XPath expression to apply, and the bottom the expected result. Now before adding the XPath, we need to declare the namespace. An XML namespace is a collection of names identified by a uniform resource identifier reference, which is a URI reference, which is used in XML documents as element and attribute names. The name is used in SOAP-UI XPath assertion also. For declaring XML namespace, we just need to click on the declare button, which would do the job for us like this, or else we can also manually declare a namespace ourselves. So we have a namespace, declare namespace ns1, which is the namespace for this request. After declaring the namespace, we need to refer the XPath using the same namespace as mentioned. Now upon clicking the declare button, we saw that two namespaces popped up. So now we have two URIs. Now one of them is a schema URL, and the other one corresponds to the actual web service URL. So we need to use the actual namespace where the web service is located, which is this one, and not the schema namespace while referencing the XPath. So we'll be using ns1 for all our references in the XPath. Okay. So now we would have to enter the XPath of the XML node that we need to validate. So we have all the nodes over here. This is our response, and we have all the nodes over here. So for example, if we take the city node, if you want to see the value of the city node, we need to use the namespace ns1 : and then we write the node name, which is city in our case. So now this line is going to give us the value of the node enclosed between the city nodes, and ns1 corresponds to the declared namespace. Okay. Now after entering the XML, we need to click on the select from current button, which is here, so that the value from the current response, which is over here, the current response that we have, would be picked up for comparison, which is going on. So we select from current, and the value of the city name comes, which is similar to that. After declaring the namespaces, we've entered the XPath of the XML node that we need to validate, and after that we have done the select from current to make the current value as the expected value that we need to compare with. Now the current value is shown to the user, which we can modify if it requires, and after that we click on save, and so the added assertion is displayed in the assertions log, and we can say that it is valid because the response had the value that we had written as expected. So our response had that value. Now let's move toward the XQuery assertions. Now the XQuery match assertion works just like the XPath assertion, with the only difference that instead of XPath, it uses an XQuery expression to select the XML that should be validated. Only the desired nodes can be selected and merged into one XML result, making assertion management much easier. Results can be ordered, allowing you to create assertions that are not dependent on the ordering of items in an XML message. So you can order the message, the result of the message as per your needs. Now this has a lot of distinct advantages for complex validations. Now let's have a look at an example. Let's say you want to validate the following response message. You have items list, and then there's a description of the item, and then the price of the item. In every item node, we have three different nodes, which are the ID node, the description node, and the price node. And there are about 5 items listed in this response. Now, let's say you always expect results of these items, but the order is undefined, and you are only interested in validating the price. So what are we going to do? That we're going to write a particular XQuery match assertion, which will do the trick. Now, we have the same dialog box as we had in XPath when we add an XQuery match assertion. Now, in this dialog box, we write, instead of writing the XML, we write the XQuery expression in the first dialog box. So we have an XQuery expression. Now, what does this expression do? This selects all the items and it orders them by the ID, and then just extracts the price into a temporary XML result. Then after that, when we press the select from current, it gives the response. As you can see that it gives the result. In the result node, it gives the price list of all the 5 items in order. So this is how it works, and then we press save and then we run it. So this is how it works. Compliance, status, and standards assertions. Now there are a list of these assertions, and we'll just discuss what they all do. Okay, first of all is HTTP download all resource assertion. Now this assertion downloads all resources referred to be an HTML document, be it images, scripts, etc., and validates that they are all available. This is applicable to any property containing HTML. Invalid HTTP status codes. This assertion checks that the target test step received an HTTP result with a status code not in the list of the defined code. This is applicable to any test step that receives HTTP messages. Not SOAP fault. This validates that the last received message is not a SOAP fault. This is again applicable to SOAP test steps only. Schema compliance. This validates that the last received message is compliant with the associated with WSDL or WADL schema definition. This is applicable to SOAP and REST test steps. SOAP fault. This validates that the last received message is a SOAP fault. Applicable only to SOAP test steps. Okay. Now this validates that the last received response is a valid SOAP response. Applicable only to SOAP test request steps only. There is also a SOAP request assertion, which again similarly checks that the last received request is a valid SOAP request or not, which is only applicable to the mock response test steps. Then we have a valid HTTP status code. This checks that the target test steps received an HTTP result with the status code in the list of the defined codes, whether it's available or not, it is valid. Applicable to any test step that receives HTTP messages. Next is the web services addressing request. This assertion validates that the last received request contains valid web services addressing headers. Now we can apply this assertion to mock response test steps only. Then we have a web services addressing response. This validates that the last received response contains a valid web services addressing headers. This is applicable to SOAP REST request steps only. And then we have the web services security status assertion, which validates that the last received message contains valid web services security headers. This is applicable to SOAP test steps.